Welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4 Abridged, where previously we had a long and grinding war with the Soviet Union trying to get them out of the way so the Allies would knock the Axis out of World War II. They eventually did it and we took over the world as a result. Now we have two missions: to defeat the Soviets anyway so that we can leave the Allies once we're at peace, and then think of a way to bring down the Allies so we can take the United Kingdom. We're getting quite far against the Soviets as we squeeze our way towards Moscow, or what remains of Moscow, after somebody nukes it, getting to that stage in the campaign when a lot of the AI factions will have access to nukes and might just use them. We have a few nukes as well actually, but I don't have any bombers, so I can't use them, and I don't want to. I'm going to save my nukes for later on. I do have some tank divisions up at the front line, helping to push forwards, although it's very micro-intensive, so not helping all that much. I've also now secured Manchuria. We were on the verge of losing all this territory because we had nothing here as the Soviets pushed in, but because the Allies must have had all their units in Japan, having just taken them down, they quickly came over and stabilized the front line for us there. I've also got a random bunch of expeditionary units that were given to me, in particular these Korean ones, that were helpful in adding to our front lines here so we can hold that position a bit easier, especially while I wait for my main block of 24 divisions to show up over there. We also need to push up into the Soviet Union through the collection of Stan countries, and that's going to be easier now because the Soviets are starting to run out of troops. So we're going to end up with a similar situation where we can just order random attacks and make advances whenever I can be bothered to click on stuff. Here we are after linking up our two fronts, so now it's one big continuous front. All very good, but a lot of that front has absolutely no supplies, and I'm having to give up on pushing in that direction because you can see our divisions are just basically dead all the time, whatever happens due to lack of supplies. With that in mind, I'm going to pull all of my troops off this front line. We'll let the Allies die on their own, and they should die less on their own because we're not eating the food. We'll just chill at the back somewhere. I do still need to press forwards though, so the war eventually ends, so we can't be too complacent. And for that we've got our little tank army somewhere on the western front, continuing to push the odd tile here and there, making small breakthroughs, turning around behind the enemy and allowing our allies to advance a little bit, and they're sometimes helping me, like right there a couple of divisions actually helped me attack. Mainly though it's just us. Here was a nice chance where we can make a quick breakthrough, because when the tank divisions, by the wills of the gods, eventually get some supplies all of a sudden, they can drive real fast because they can use fuel instead of pushing the tanks, and with this we can very quickly encircle bits of the enemy line, and because the enemy AI is also not doing anything, they're not really going to react to this, allowing us to cut off pockets and then destroy them. I'm not that interested though in completely destroying the Soviet army because I kind of want it to still exist as part of my plan. I want those divisions to be joining me after this, so killing lots of enemies isn't necessarily a good idea. We're skipping through vast amounts of gameplay here because there's just nothing to say. The line was slowly advanced until we reached this point, when I noticed we could take the enemy capital. Our allies could easily have done that at any time. They've got a massive army sitting right next to it. They just straight up didn't, so we step in with the smaller army and do it. This almost capitulates the USSR. Luckily though it doesn't, and the reason that's lucky is because after getting to this point I realised there are some things we actually need to sort out before we capitulate them, because when the peace treaty happens, we want the USSR to join us. We need to be in a new faction before the war ends. We also would like to be communist if possible. We do have a communist majority, but there's no election for a long time, so it's unlikely to change naturally. I also am not allowed to be outside of the Allies because we're at war. This means the USSR will end up just being part of the Allies, most likely after the war ends, which will ruin my plan to use the USSR's manpower in my war against the Allies. I don't know if there's anything we can legitimately do to alter that course of events, but what we can do is cheat. So now I used a cheat that lets you do various diplomatic things without meeting conditions, that means I can leave the Allies while the war is still going on. So now we are neutral, and I immediately want to go on and make a new faction that I will be the head of. So I had a chat with Korea, who were willing to join a faction with me. So we're going to create the official Reverse Raj Union, a global military alliance dedicated to allowing me to invade the United Kingdom. They will all sacrifice themselves for this noble goal. And there we go, now we have our own faction. When a peace treaty happens, we can force other satellites, puppets, into this faction with us after the war. So we'll start building up a force that might actually be able to contest the Allies. The other thing I wanted to do is be communist, as mentioned, and we can just cheat for that as well. There's no way to stage a coup on yourself in the game, as far as I know, like you can with other countries. So let's just pretend that you can, and I've used a cheat to convert our government to be communist. I don't remember why I need to be communist. I think I just felt like it was a good idea at the time. I could do this plan by making the Demintern, so make a democratic alliance that's just not the Allies. Pretty sure that would also be fine. Although there are some military advantages to being communist. We can do more conscription, which might be handy. The other cheat I decided to do for myself is to allow myself to also go down the communist focus tree. This does come with some disadvantages because some of the downsides to that tree stack with the downsides to the democratic tree, and I ended up getting two -25% recruitable manpower debuffs at one point, which completely ruins everything. But the fact that in the communist tree you can grab collectivization ends up making up for it. That's the focus that gets rid of a lot of the agrarian economy problem, which massively debuffs you for the entire campaign, and I think that's the only thing you can do about it is the collectivization focus in the communist tree. There was a problem with my cheating rampage. The game started reverting those cheats automatically. Apparently, the Democrats have a large enough mandate that they can just take over the government again. This doesn't appear to be the case, at least they're not as popular as the Communist Party, so I'm not quite sure what happened there or what we're supposed to do about it. If only the same thing had happened with the Communist Party, why weren't we allowed to take over? I remember as Belgium, once you became popular you could just press a button and become communist. That didn't happen to us here, maybe we weren't communist enough. But we are now. I just did some more cheats. This time the Communist Party has 75% support, and this proved to be enough to keep us in power with no automatic kickouts. Very handy. I've built up absolutely loads of political power during all the fighting, so I can start to use it to try and create some other communist countries that might be natural fits for our alliance. France was a potential one. They're already there on their own. They're about 50% communist. Figured if we can push them over and get them on our side, that of course would be an amazing strategic acquisition for an invasion of the UK. So while that burns away in the background, we do need to go and finish off the Comintern. We're going to cut most of that out. You can see I went back at it again up into the steppe and captured a lot of it, which may or may not have contributed some victory points to the war. Got this massive blob, and then, while just generally microing to continue the advance, the game freezes, and that means you've succeeded, because it's working out what to do with peace. We get loads of the Soviet Union stuff in the capitulation, which is nice, and now for the peace treaty. By this point, I did know that I have full control of this thing, which made me chill out a little and not rapidly claim as much territory as possible, because claiming territory isn't all that important anyway. You can see on the right I did quite a lot of puppeting and just claimed a couple of regions, so our territory will only slightly expand as a result of World War II Part 2, but our faction is now going to be a major power, because all of those puppeted nations will be on our side. Unfortunately, at some point during the fighting there, the French did actually have a communist uprising that failed, so now we're not going to get that really good strategic situation. I'm still going to try and get it if I can though. I'm also going to randomly communistify a bunch of other people, including the Paraguayans, who are annoyingly, due to my earlier mistake, there amongst my European setup. The world is now split between the two great factions, the Allies and the Reverse Raj Union. All together, we probably match them, although the Soviets actually have very few troops left after the war, so they're not going to be as useful as I thought. Still, we're in a good position with a massive block of territory. I wanted to make that block bigger, I figured all of the Asian neutral factions, maybe we could just absorb them and then not worry about all these internal borders we have within the faction. This isn't really going to happen because they're all like despotates or democracies, and it's going to be very hard to change that. Even the actual communists weren't too interested in joining up with us. I think what I should have done here in retrospect is forgotten about the Reverse Raj thing again for a bit and just justified wars on all of these small Asian factions and taken all of their territory or puppeted them through the wars. If we'd done that, we could have made a nice strong block, but instead I was right away getting to work on my long time coming plan of doing something against the United Kingdom. Our troops are shipping out across the world because the allies are everywhere, so we'll need some troops everywhere if we want to defend our big blocks of territory. Obviously we don't have enough, not even nearly, but maybe our puppets will help us out. We can't order them to get there before the war starts, but once the war's going they may help us. We've also got some other preparations we can make. We can build a whole bunch of naval bases and infrastructure and more nuclear power plants, all getting ready for when we need to supply stuff all over the globe and nuke stuff all over the globe. We can also still go through the communist focus tree. Some of these are going to be useful for our economy, but in the late game these things aren't really that important actually. I was trying to get towards that workplace democracy for the plus 10% production, but again we don't really need that at this stage. Our economy's all fine. Here's some really good news. The USA has finally split from the Allies, joined the Rome Protocols, which is the fascist main faction led by Italy, and they've started a war with the Allies, so they didn't wait very long. This means we're going to have a distraction on our hands, which may come in useful. The downside is that the Rome Protocols faction is way smaller than the Allies, so the risk is that the Allies will steamroll them and become more powerful by absorbing them. But if we act soon, if we can get our war going at the same time as that war, it should make our war easier. So that's a further incentive to rush towards a UK invasion. Still, there are more things we need to do. I've built over 5,000 jet fighters during the war against the Soviets. I wasn't using any of them, saving them all for right now, where I'm going to deploy a whole bunch of fighter wings, but we'll have to wait for them to train before we can use them. If we can grab ourselves some aerial superiority over the United Kingdom, that could be very useful when it comes to using my nukes. Or perhaps even more importantly, we'll need it to stop them from nuking us, which may indeed happen. The other thing we of course need to get done is naval invasion planning. We need to set up our troops at various ports and have them go through the planning procedure to allow us to just ship out as soon as the war starts for a surprise attack of sorts, although I guess they can see us doing this. The AI won't know what we're planning until it's already too late. Doing this will require us to not defend most of our European borders. Pretty much all of our borders across the world are going to be relatively undefended because we simply don't have enough troops. We have loads of territory that's just occupied lands. They don't produce very much. They're not supplying manpower to our armies. So we have way fewer troops than the same territory would have split between lots of factions. It's going to be hard to defend everything, and we're really not going to commit to defending a lot of it. My main goal is just to go for the UK. At this stage it doesn't necessarily matter if we lose all of our mainland European territory. One thing we will need to do before we can even think about attacking the UK though, is get naval supremacy in the couple of regions between us and them. For that reason, we have here this gigantic pile of all the ships I've made throughout the campaign. Since I got loads of occupied territory after World War II Part 1 with dockyards, I have built quite a few ships. I've got loads of heavy cruisers and submarines, and a bunch of these terrible destroyers. Now they all now need to try and get some experience points. We can get naval supremacy without the experience points, but maintaining it for however long it takes for our invasion to go through would be good. So having a navy that looks strong is probably a good thing. Not that I really know what a strong navy looks like at this stage. We're just throwing out a bunch of random ships to see what happens. Cutting again now to some time later, after various preparations have been made, our fleet is now mostly trained up and is ready to go, so we need to start splitting this into 3 different groups at least that could control the 3 sea regions we need to go through. We've also been justifying our war against the UK. My war goal is just to conquer the southern UK, but that'll be enough to make us be at war with the whole Allies, no doubt. I'm also researching the oil processing technologies, preempting the possibility that our fuel supply might go downtown once the war starts and we lose control of various sea lanes, that sort of stuff. Would be very helpful if it didn't happen, because we'll need to be supplying troops in various locations around the world. Well, we'll just have to see how that goes. Most of my ships are right here. I'm going to be focusing our naval strength on the English Channel for the most part, because the UK of course does have a navy that will likely come back and try to interfere with my plan. I'm just going to blindly hope that my navy will stop them, or at least stop them for long enough for us to cross the channel or get any reinforcements we need in there later. I eventually managed to split up my fleet into the groups we need and start gaining that naval supremacy by patrolling around the various regions. That's all good to go then. The other thing we'll be needing to maintain is aerial superiority. I'm quickly grabbing a few of the aerial techs to help out with that. I've got quite a few planes here, like between 1 and 2,000. I could have deployed more. I had 5,000 planes in reserve. The only reason I didn't put more wings out there is no reason. I don't know why I didn't put more wings out. I've actually upgraded the airports on the front line, so we could easily have like up to 10,000 planes participate in this. I just straight up didn't bother to create the air wings for unknown reasons. Maybe I didn't want to use all the fuel training them at once or something. I guess manpower concerns could have been there, but I now do have the collectivization focus, so we got an extra 1 million manpower from that. We'll eventually also get more manpower from our occupied territories as they calm down and start the volunteer army mode, where they add a little bit of manpower. There goes the pre-war save in case everything goes terribly wrong immediately. We're about to do it, so I'm going to end this video here because I don't have enough footage to reach the normal length basically. We are going to invade the UK right now and see what happens. So the final promise of the Reverse Raj campaign will be kept as we actually attack the United Kingdom after all this time in the next part.